Anaya's mother woke up suddenly, breathing heavily. She had seen the same dream again. Anaya was screaming, calling her name, her hands reaching out, but something was pulling her away. Fire, darkness, fear. She sat up, rubbing her face. It had been a month since the accident, yet these nightmares wouldn't stop. Was this grief, or was it something else? She didn't wake her husband this time. He would only say, "It's just your mind playing tricks." But she knew it wasn't. She got up and walked to Anaya's room. Everything was the same, untouched. The Quran on her desk, the prayer mat near the window, the books from the madrasa stacked neatly. But her daughter was gone. She sat on Anaya's bed, staring at the wall. Why did these dreams feel so real? That morning, as she made tea, she heard a knock at the door. It was Hafsa's mother. One look at her face, and she knew. "You saw it too?" Hafsa's mother whispered. Anaya's mother nodded. The same dream. They sat together in silence, their hands trembling over their cups. Two different mothers, the same nightmare. Then, Hafsa's little brother started crying again. He had been asking for her every day, but this time was different. He ran into the room, tears streaming down his face. "Mama, Hafsa is in a bad place," he sobbed. His mother held him. "No, beta, she's in Jannah." The little boy shook his head violently. "I saw her, Mama. She was falling. She kept calling me." The mothers froze. Hafsa's father came into the room. His voice was serious. "Enough of this. We need to find answers." That night, Anaya's father had a dream too. He hadn't told anyone at first. In his dream, he was standing in an empty place. The sky was dark. The air was thick. Then, suddenly heard crying. He turned and saw Anaya and Hafsa. They were sitting on the ground, their clothes torn, their faces covered in dirt. Anaya looked up at him, her voice weak. "Baba, I'm so hungry." He stepped forward. "Come, beta, let's go home." But when he tried to touch her, his hands passed through her. Hafsa looked at him too. "Why didn't you warn us? Why didn't you tell us?" Then, a voice behind him. They were given a chance, but they chose something else. He turned, but there was no one there. He woke up in a cold sweat. At Fajr, he told Hafsa's father about it. They both sat in silence, staring at the prayer mats in front of them. "What if these aren't just dreams?" Anaya's father whispered. That day, they went to their local mufti. The mufti listened to everything: the nightmares, the voices, the visions. When they finished, he sighed. "These could be signs from Allah. Your daughters were righteous, but something was wrong." Anaya's mother wiped her tears. What was wrong? They prayed, they fasted, they studied the Quran. The mufti shook his head. "Only Allah knows. But if these dreams continue, you must seek more knowledge." That night, Anaya's mother couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., she heard whispers from Anaya's room. She stood outside, listening. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but then she heard Anaya's voice. She opened the door. The room was empty. The prayer mat was folded. The books were stacked. She stepped inside, her heart pounding. She knew what she heard. Then, suddenly, loud crash from Hafsa's house. She ran outside. Hafsa's mother was already standing in her courtyard, her hands on her face. A picture frame had fallen, a picture of Hafsa. The two women stood there, staring at each other. Something was wrong, and they needed to find out what it was. The next morning, both families gathered. The nightmares, the visions, the whispers, they could no longer be ignored. Anaya's father and Hafsa's father sat in silence, their faces heavy with worry. "We have asked the mufti," Hafsa's father said, rubbing his forehead, but he didn't have answers. Anaya's mother took a deep breath. "Then, we keep searching." The first stop was a well-known scholar. They sat before him, explaining everything: the repeated nightmares, the screams, the strange whispers. The scholar listened carefully, nodding slowly. Then he said, "Sometimes Allah sends signs to warn the living. Perhaps there was something hidden in their lives that was not pleasing to him." Anaya's mother felt her stomach twist. But they prayed, they read Quran, they did everything right. The scholar exhaled. Did they do everything right? Or did they do what seemed right? Silence. He continued, "There are sins we commit without realizing, things we take lightly, but in the sight of Allah, they are heavy. Search their past. Find what they loved the most. It will give you answers." The families left, but they were still lost. That evening, Hafsa's younger brother had another dream. This time, he saw Hafsa and Anaya outside a huge gate. They were knocking, but the gate wouldn't open. A voice from inside called out, "You do not belong here." Hafsa turned to Anaya, her face full of fear. "Why, Anaya? Why can't we enter?" Anaya shook her head. "I don't know." The voice spoke again. Jannah is not for those whose hearts belonged elsewhere. Then the gates vanished, and the two girls were falling screaming into darkness. The little boy woke up, crying so loudly that the whole house ran to his room. He clung to his mother's clothes, sobbing, "Mama, Hafsa was falling. She kept falling. She couldn't stop." Hafsa's mother's eyes filled with tears. This was getting worse. The second stop was another scholar. This time, they went with urgency. The man listened to their story, his face growing darker with every word. Finally, he said, "You are asking everyone except the person who knew them best." Hafsa's father frowned. "Who?" The scholar folded his hands. "Their teacher, the one who taught them the Quran. If anyone knew their true habits, it would be him." The families froze. The mudrasa. Why hadn't they thought of it before? The third stop, the last hope, was the imam of the mudrasa where the girls studied. They went immediately, arriving just before Maghrib. The imam greeted them warmly, but his face turned serious when he saw their expressions. "What brings you here?" he asked. The parents explained everything: the deaths, the dreams, the screams, the searching, the scholars, the unanswered questions. The imam listened without interrupting. When they finished, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he sighed. "I was afraid this would happen." Anaya's mother's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" The imam looked at them carefully. "Your daughters were good girls. They prayed, fasted. They learned the Quran." A pause. "But that is not what made them best friends." The parents exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean?" The imam reached for the old wooden cabinet behind him. He pulled out a dusty stack of notebooks, Anaya and Hafsa's books. He opened them, flipping through the pages. And then he showed them. The parents gasped. Inside, on the same pages as Quranic verses, were drawings, pictures, stickers of BTS, of K-pop idols, of singers. The parents stared in horror. The imam's voice was heavy. They did not love each other for the sake of Allah. They loved each other because of this. Anaya's father's hands shook. "This was inside their Quran books?" The imam nodded. They memorized Allah's words while filling their hearts with idols. Hafsa's mother's breath came in sharp gasps. "But they weren't obsessed. They were just fans." The imam's eyes darkened. "Fans? When you love someone so much that their name is next to the words of Allah, is that just being a fan?" Silence, he continued. "Who did they talk about more? Allah or these people? Whose posters were in their rooms? Whose names were on their tongues? Who made their hearts race with excitement?" Tears spilled from Anaya's mother's eyes. She had seen it before. The posters, the stickers, the playlists. She had thought it was innocent. She had never stopped them. The imam sighed, his voice softer now. "When someone replaces Allah in their heart of an unknowing late, has consequences. They died, but their hearts belonged somewhere else." Hafsa's father buried his face in his hands. Ya Allah. The truth was clear now, painfully, horrifyingly clear. They had lost their daughters, not because they didn't pray, not because they didn't fast, but because their hearts had room for everyone except Allah. The mothers wept. The fathers sat in shaken silence. The imam closed the books, his voice firm. "There is only one way to save them." The parents looked at him, desperate. "Tell us." The imam took a deep breath. "Remove their idols, seek forgiveness, and beg Allah for mercy before it's too late." The parents sat frozen, the truth sinking in like a knife to the heart. Their daughters had memorized the Quran, prayed Tahajud, fasted in Ramadan yet. Their love for these singers had taken priority over Allah. The imam's voice was serious. "Your daughters weren't just fans. They loved these idols in a way that replaced their connection with Allah. And the worst part? They mixed that love with the Quran itself." Hafsa's mother wiped her tears. "We thought it was harmless." The imam shook his head. "No love is harmless when it pushes Allah aside." Anaya's father clenched his fists. "What do we do now?" The imam sighed. "Remove every trace of their idols. Clean their rooms, their books, their belongings. But that is only the beginning. You must beg Allah for their forgiveness and your own." That night, both families returned home, broken. The mothers entered their daughters' rooms. The walls that once felt warm were now suffocating. The air felt heavy, thick, with guilt. And then they saw them, the posters, the pictures, the lyrics written in diaries, right next to Quranic verses. Tears streamed down their faces as they began ripping everything down, every notebook, every sticker, every picture gone. They went to their daughters' Islamic books, their Quran notebooks, and their hearts shattered. Between the pages that held the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there were scribbles of their favorite singers' names, song lyrics, and heart symbols. It was as if they had placed their idols inside the Quran itself. Anaya's mother held one of the books, her body trembling. She pressed it to her chest, sobbing, "Ya Allah, forgive them. Ya Allah, forgive us." Hafsa's father stood in the doorway, his voice hollow. "We raised them wrong." The next morning, they gathered at the masjid. The imam led them in prayer, and for the first time, they prayed not for relief, but for the salvation of their daughters. Anaya's father raised his hands after Gala. His voice shook as he made dua. "Ya Allah, if we failed them in life, do not let them be lost in death. We took these sins lightly. We ignored the signs. Ya Allah, do not let us make the same mistake again. Forgive them, forgive us, and guide our future generations before it is too late." That night, the dream stopped. No more screams, no more falling, no more terror. But the pain remained because their daughters had gone too far before realizing the truth. The news of their story spread across the town. People who had once thought it was innocent to love singers, to idolize celebrities, began removing them from their homes. Young girls ripped down posters from their walls. They deleted songs, removed pictures, threw away old notebooks, because now they knew. And there are those who take others as equal to Allah. They love them as they should love Allah. Written in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 165. The families had learned the truth too late, but the rest of the world still had time. My dear sisters, listen carefully. There is a lie being fed to you, and you don't even realize it. A lie that has trapped thousands before you. The lie that it's just music, that it's just a celebrity, just a fandom, entertainment. But it is not. Tell me, who do you think about more? Allah or them? Who is on your walls? Who is in your notebooks? Who is in your heart? When you wake up, whose words do you read first, the Quran or their song lyrics? Ask yourself, why do their names come faster to your tongue than the name of Allah? They do not know you. They will never love you. They will never cry for you, pray for you, or care about your hereafter. Yet, you waste your love on them. Look at the Prophet Muhammadun Salamun, a man who spent his nights crying for you. A man who said, "Ummati, Ummati, my people, my people." A man who loved you before you were even born. And look at your mother, the one who carried you, fed you, stayed awake when you were sick. She calls your name every day, but you ignore her and listen to the voices of men who do not even know you exist. Tell me, my sister, what do you gain from loving them? Do they make you a better Muslim? Do they remind you of Allah? Do they lead you to Jannah? Or do they steal your time, your love, your faith until there is nothing left for Allah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us, and there are those who take others as equal to Allah. They love them as they should love Allah. But those who believe are stronger in their love for Allah. Written in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 165. Who do you love more? The Prophet Muhammadun sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us to love for the sake of Allah. But instead, you love for the sake of men who promote haram, who dance and sing while your heart drifts further from your Creator. Sister, wake up before it is too late, because one day you will stand before Allah. Subscribe for more stories